Okay, welcome to video number 53 of the Diaries of a Coronavirologist YouTube channel. Today is the 25th of February and we are up to about 113 million confirmed cases of COVID-19 around the world and around 2.5 million confirmed deaths. So there's no video last week and there's going to be a fairly quick run through on this video tonight because I'm a little bit swamped with things here in the lab. So we recently got hold of two of the variant viruses. We've got the UK variant and the South Africa variant viruses, which means for some things my workload is now tripled. Instead of just working with the wild type, the original SARS coronavirus 2, I now have the original and the variant viruses. We're trying to get hold of more so that workload could continue to increase because we always need controls and comparisons within experiments. So there's a lot going on and I have a sore thumb from all the pipetting I've been doing, for example, and it's just swamping my time a little bit. I'm also doing a bit of a personal review of my own best practices and systems that I use to stay on top of everything with work. So obviously the workload's going up. That's a good time to really assess, is my task tracking, my to-do systems, my time management, is that all working effectively and well? Am I staying on top of literature and referencing well and all those kind of things? So I'm going through a little process of looking at all of that, which is very time consuming, but in the long run pays off because it makes me more productive and effective. My reason for sharing all this is just to say why I didn't post a video last week, why this one's going to be a fairly quick run through of a topic, and why maybe I'll be less than one a week videos for a little period. I'm hoping that I'll be able to post one video every week. Part of the management systems will hopefully allow that. But if I miss weeks, that's why, because my priority is not a YouTube channel, my priority is being a good scientist. But with that said, it's a good time to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so that you can get the updates if you want to keep coming back for these videos, which hopefully you do. I do have various topics that I want to talk about on the channel that require a bit more background reading and research and solidifying the ideas of the notions I have in my head into actually what is the concrete science. And they're the kind of things that will take more time to develop. So for tonight, I'm just focusing on something that didn't require too much background information, which is to talk about another vaccine. So tonight's topic is the Johnson&Johnson vaccine against SARS coronavirus 2. This vaccine is just about to get its emergency use authorization by the FDA here in the United States. So on Wednesday, there was a meeting and a report put out to say that the FDA have the view that the vaccine is safe and effective for use. And tomorrow, Friday, or today when I post the video, there'll be another meeting to assess it all again and to take it towards getting emergency use authorization. I suspect that over the weekend or early next week, this will be given the green light, which would make this Johnson&Johnson vaccine the third to have an EUA here in the United States, along with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines. In this video, what I want to do is talk about what that vaccine is and how it works, how it's designed to elicit an immune response, and then take a little look at the efficacy data, talk about how effective it is at protecting against COVID-19. The short version of that is that it's a viral vectored vaccine using an adenovirus. And this is very similar to the AstraZeneca vaccine that's produced by the University of Oxford. So I've talked about the AstraZeneca vaccine a lot on the channel. I've put some links to videos down in the description for this one if you want to go back to those, where I talk a lot more about the technology than I will here. So if you want more detail, there's old videos you can watch of me talking about the ChAdOx vaccine as it was, or now the AstraZeneca vaccine. The short version on the efficacy side is that it's 66% effective at blocking moderate to severe COVID-19. But that requires a bit more discussion, so I'll get to that after I talk about what this vaccine is and how it works. So I was just saying, it's very similar to the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine in that it's also a viral vectored vaccine and it also uses adenovirus. So the full designation for this Johnson&Johnson vaccine is Ad26 CoV2 CoV2S. So to break down each of those parts, that's Ad26 for adenovirus 26, CoV2 for SARS coronavirus 2, SARS-CoV-2, S for the spike protein of SARS coronavirus 2, the part that makes our body, or that stimulates our body to make antibodies and therefore provide immunity. So this Johnson&Johnson vaccine is based on adenovirus 26. The vaccine from AstraZeneca and the University of Oxford, the ChAdOx vaccine is based on chimp adenovirus. That's the ChAd. So they're very similar technologies, subtle difference in that the AstraZeneca uses a chimp adenovirus, whereas the Johnson&Johnson uses a human adenovirus 26. So adenoviruses are another category of viruses. So coronaviruses are one category, adenoviruses are another. However, adenoviruses are very different to coronaviruses in that their genetic material is in the form of DNA. So they're much more like us. They're a DNA form. Coronaviruses are RNA based. Overall, there's about 50 different types of adenovirus that interact with humans. They can infect and replicate in humans, but they don't all cause disease. Very few of them actually do cause disease. They cause things like the common cold. That can be an adenovirus. They can cause conjunctivitis and some gastrointestinal things. But generally, they're pretty benign. We don't really think about them much, which is possibly why you may have not really heard about adenoviruses before all of these vaccines. So as I say, the genome of adenoviruses is made up of DNA, and DNA is very pliable in the lab. We can do a lot of things with DNA, and these viral vectors are engineered DNA units. While it's a virus, it is something that's been engineered in a lab to be beneficial for us. So normally a virus subverts the way a human works in order to make more copies of itself and in the process cause damage. In this instance, we're subverting the way that a virus works to have a beneficial effect for us. So normally adenoviruses bind to a cell, go into the cell, put their DNA into that cell, and the cell thinks it's its own DNA, makes RNA, makes protein, and that makes more viruses. In the case of these vaccines, the adenovirus that's used has been crippled, so it can no longer make more copies of itself. It can still bind to a cell, it can still go into a cell and transmit its genetic material as DNA, but it can't then make any more copies of itself. It's a dead-end infection. It's crippled, it's a one-way trip. However, as part of that crippling process, the DNA in the adenovirus that's removed to cripple it has been replaced with the DNA sequence that is capable of making the spike protein of SARS coronavirus 2. Now, as I say, coronaviruses are RNA viruses, so to just avoid any confusion, DNA makes RNA, makes protein. The way RNA viruses work, they just short circuit that by being RNA and go into protein and making more copies of themselves. But because RNA and DNA are intrinsically linked, their sequences are matched, we can make an RNA genome of a virus into a DNA copy, or the RNA sequence for spike protein into a DNA copy. So that DNA instruction, those DNA instructions have been put into the adenovirus 26 in that crippling process. So now that virus goes into a cell, it releases that DNA payload, and the cell will make the spike protein, and that's it. No more virus comes out, no disease is caused, just the single spike protein of SARS coronavirus 2. Now overall, this is the same way that the chimp adenovirus from AstraZeneca works, and it's largely the same way that the RNA viruses, mRNA vaccines from Pfizer and Moderna work. As I say, DNA makes RNA, makes protein. The two adenovirus vaccines are based here, the mRNA vaccines are based here, but the end product is the same. It's a single spike protein that goes into our body and produces an antibody response which can protect us. There is another vaccine out there that also uses adenovirus, which is the Sputnik V vaccine from the Gamaleya Research Institute in Russia. That vaccine also uses adenovirus 26, and it combines it with adenovirus 5 for giving a 2-dose vaccine. And that brings me to the final point about describing what this vaccine is and how it works, is that this is just a single shot. So unlike all the other approved vaccines around the world, the Johnson&Johnson vaccine only requires 1 dose. And that's great news because it means for producing the same amount of vaccine, you can immunise twice as many people, bringing costs down, making things easier. So this is really good news to have a single dose vaccine. And that brings me on to looking at the efficacy data. So as I said at the top, it's 66% effective, and that number's drawn from press release data, not peer review data, as always seems to be going on at the minute. The peer review paper, I'm sure, is in the works, but the number we have is 66%. Now you may be thinking that sounds low, aren't the other vaccines that are already approved up in the 90% range for efficacy? And you'd be right in thinking that they are. But we can dive a little bit deeper into that. So the trial for this, the phase 3 trial, looking at 40,000 people, comparable to all the others, is being performed in the United States, South America, and South Africa. Now, there's also lots of variants that are emerging, and two of the main ones are the South African variant and the Brazil variant. So this vaccine is being trialled in places that have these variant viruses, and these variant viruses might be developing resistance to vaccines. So it's really hard to compare the efficacy of vaccines being trialled now to vaccines that were being trialled 6 months ago. So 66% number is already a hard comparison to have to the 90% of the other vaccines. If we break it down further into the geographical regions, this vaccine is 72% or was 72% effective in the American part of the study, 66% in South American part, and 57% in South Africa. Now those numbers may sound lower, but again, we can take it a bit further into the breakdown. So those numbers come from the amount of people that were protected from developing moderate to severe disease. If we only look at the most severe cases, hospitalization, there was 85% protection across the board, and that is a very good number. Like all the other vaccines, there were no deaths recorded in anyone who received the vaccine either. On the side effect front, it's pretty much like all the others. There's cases of pain at the site of injection, headaches, fatigue, malaise, all those kinds of things. Potentially, though, it's a little bit lower than is seen for some of the other vaccines. So, for example, fatigue was only in about 38% of people who received the Johnson&Johnson vaccine, compared to being about 60% in the people who got the Pfizer vaccine. So the side effects are similar and potentially maybe occur in fewer people. And that's the summary of the phase 3 data that's going into trying to get this vaccine approved by the FDA. So 66% may seem low compared to the 90+% of the Pfizer, Moderna, and AstraZeneca vaccines. However, as I say, that's a little bit hard to compare because of the variant viruses that are emerging. If we just look at the US, where there's seemingly less spread of the variants, it's 72%. So it's still lower, but that's not disastrous. As a reminder, the FDA would have approved any vaccines that show greater than 50% protection from severe to moderate to severe COVID-19. So this is still well above that 50% mark. To add a bit of, editorialization to this and give a viewpoint of my own that's not the science that I normally just focus on, this vaccine might be ideal to give to younger, healthier individuals and save the more effective doses for the more elderly, more at risk, people with underlying health conditions. So we don't have enough vaccines to go around, so how can we distribute them effectively? You want the most effective vaccine to be in the people who are going to develop the most severe disease. Vaccines with lower efficacy, obviously that's not great, we want every vaccine to be 100%, but that doesn't mean that they can't serve a purpose. These could still serve a great purpose to get more coverage of people. So let's do a little thought experiment here and use some numbers for what I mean. So I'm 30, I've got no underlying health conditions, I'm relatively healthy compared to the general population, I think. So I am at very low risk of developing severe COVID-19. Let's say I've got 0.5% chance that if I get infected, I will develop a severe case. If I take a vaccine that's 50% effective, let alone 66 or 72% as the Johnson&Johnson seems to be, that 50% protection means my risk of developing severe COVID-19 is now down at 0.25%. So I'm even lower risk than I already was. Someone in their, let's say, 80s with some underlying health conditions, they might be at about 10% chance of developing severe COVID-19 if they become infected. So a vaccine that's 50% effective there only cuts that risk down to 5% in a loose sense. So they're still 10 times more likely to develop a severe case than I would be without any vaccine. However, if you give that person a vaccine that's 95% effective, then that brings the 10% chance down to 0.5% chance. So the more effective vaccine brings them down to a level of a healthy 30-year-old. Very loose, rough sums and things like that going on there, looking at relative risk. And obviously relative risk doesn't matter to an individual. But just to lay out what I mean by my idea that maybe these vaccines that might come out with a slightly lower efficacy they might be better used in younger, healthier people, allowing the vaccines to be distributed better. The other idea around distribution, though, comes down to the fact that this vaccine is really stable as well. Because it uses adenoviruses, it's inherently more stable than RNA. This vaccine can be stored at fridge temperature, so between 2 and 8 degrees Celsius, like your fridge at home, for up to 3 months. So therefore, it's much better for delivery into poorer parts of the world where there aren't minus 80 Celsius freezers that are required for the Pfizer vaccine. So this vaccine, while slightly lower in terms of efficacy, it is great to have because of the benefits it has. It's one dose, making it a lot easier to get to people, and it's much more stable. It doesn't require super cold storage. It can be kept in a fridge, and that makes this much better to distribute to the poorer parts of the world. And that's all I've got for tonight. So the United States is about to hit a point of having a third vaccine approved for use. So Johnson&Johnson are about to join Pfizer and Moderna as having emergency use authorizations, EUAs, for delivering their vaccine to people in the United States. And I fully expect that once it's approved in the United States, other countries will follow suit. Once it's shown to be safe and effective in one place, it's going to continue to be safe and effective in other places. In terms of who's bought what in this, the numbers I've been able to find, the United States have 100 million doses lined up, and they expect to get them by June or July. I always mix those two up. The UK has 30 million doses on order. The EU has 200 million. And to my point about how this vaccine may be great for the developing world, the COVAX WHO project, which is designed to try and get vaccines into poorer parts of the world, has 500 million doses on order. And of course, this is all great news to have. The variants that are out there and continuing to emerge are still a looming spectre over these vaccines that we're developing. There is still a chance that these variants can escape the protection provided by these vaccines, and it's something that needs to be continually assessed and looked at. In good news, though, Pfizer and Moderna have announced that they're going to start trials of a variant vaccine to target the variant viruses. So the companies are working towards producing variant vaccines that may be more effective against the variant viruses. And people like myself working in labs like the one I do are testing things like this on a day-to-day basis to work out if these variants really are escaping or whether the vaccines we've got are good enough and whether new ones are going to be effective. So all in all, this is an optimistic video. It's another good news day in our fight against COVID-19. So with all that said, thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like for the YouTube metrics. Please leave questions and comments down below. I will do my best to tackle them, but if you've watched the full video, I was saying at the top, I'm swamped, so my responses may be a bit delayed, but I will do my best. If you're new here, please remember to subscribe and hit the notification bell so that you get the videos if you want more. And as always, please stay safe, wash your hands, wear a mask, and keep calm and carry on. We will get through this pandemic.